So do you have any questions before we carry on? We're going to go more into it all, so but do you have any questions? Yes. Where's the microphone?
No, it's working.
Okay, good.
So I have this question. We're talking just after the first break. We were talking about the fact that we need to look into ourselves and not into the outside world in order to trace our mind back. And not to look to the outside world for the object of our angerness or happiness. I was thinking if tracing our mind back, I'm wondering if doesn't it call it a process about which the scientists, Darwin or evolution talks about, that actually if we observe the animal world, we can understand better our angerness or our need of survival or our natural instincts. That would be, and in this way it is not an individual process but actually it's a collective process of evolution that these feelings.
I understand that. Yeah, that's one way of presenting the world, isn't it? Mr. Darwin's way is a way of presenting the world, and I'm not complaining about it. But the Buddha's view, he doesn't. He might not disagree with that assessment to some degree. There's going to be common ground. I'm not going to cover my face. What it is. So, but the point is, the Buddha's saying the Buddhist view is this very vast, very sophisticated, very precise analysis of the actual mind itself. That, you see, that's why these words are very simple, but we don't have a view like that. That's why you asked that question. You know, anger is a particular conceptual story in the mind that is the response when your attachment, which in turn is a particular conceptual story in your mind when it doesn't get what it wants. It's a completely internal process. So Buddha's view of the cause of the universe is an internal process. Darwin's is an external. That's the point I'm making. So this is another whole way of seeing the world. You can learn a lot about yourself by looking at an animal. No one disagrees with that. You can learn a lot about yourself by seeing how your mother taught you and what the people did to you. Of course you can. But all the Buddha's saying is, he says that doesn't get to the root of the problem. He's getting to the root of the problem, he says, which is the mind itself. And if you want to then track back your mind to past karma, not to the monkeys and that, but internally tracking back. So there's two things. You internally track back, which is the view of karma, which we'll go into, but this other one is internally tracking not back, but down. Unpacking the emotion, going beneath the emotional component, getting to hear the conceptual story. And Buddha's whole analysis is that these neurotic states of mind are not valid assessments of the world. That's a very specific viewpoint and very fascinating, and it's completely foreign to us. Which we want to continue to talk about. Are you hearing my words?
Yes, I did.
So you have some more thing to say?
No, just to be more precise, it means that there are two parallel discourses or two parallel...
There are many ways of presenting the world, aren't there? There's many bodies of knowledge.
And this doesn't help. From a Buddhist point of view, looking at the outside world doesn't help in the inner process.
I didn't say that.
I'm just asking.
No, I know, I did not say that. And I just said, the last sentence I said, you learn an enormous amount from looking at that. You can learn an enormous amount from looking at how your mother treated you. You can learn an enormous amount about looking at your brain, your DNA, your genes. Buddha's not arguing with that. He just says it doesn't get to the root of the problem. You see, the point of this, the analysis that Mr. Darwin gives us, or the other scientific or the physical models, they're explanations of what's there, but there's no conclusion from it. There's no goal that says by learning that, you can now learn to get rid of anger, get rid of jealousy, get rid of suffering, and become a liberated, amazing, blissful, wise, compassionate person. That's not the goal.
Right.
You see, this is the point here. It's an analysis that's such that if you use that analysis, it enables you to change your mind fundamentally and become a blissful, clear, wise, compassionate, empathetic person. That's the bottom line for the Buddha. You see my point?
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Yes.
Where are you? Yes.
I would like a practical example. For example, you said earlier before the break Jabbar is cheating on his
Yeah,
girlfriend,
give example.
right? Yeah. How can we use this new mentality
Yes,
to be happy
I understand.
even when this situation?
I understand. Totally understand. Perfect.
I want some practical.
Yes, I understand. That's what I'm going to do now. Start using. I'm sorry, you've become this example, Joe. And usually my boyfriends end up being really horrible boyfriends. So you're going to have to be a horrible person if you can. Jababa. So, what is it?
Jabbar.
What is, I forget already my boyfriend's name. What? What?
Jabbar.
What?
Jabbar.
Jabari. Forgive me. Jabari. Okay. It's a really good question.
Did I say it correctly?
Jabari. So let's do it now. Let's do it. So let's start for me being a normal. Let's just say I'm a normal, ordinary victim, hopeless, self-piteous, miserable person who believes I've got to find someone out there who will make everything perfect for me. I mean, that's an extreme example of how we all
Well,
are.
I don't see that.
I beg your pardon?
Everyone sees themselves like.
Oh, I see. You've not noticed the world. We're all dependent upon someone else. We all get angry when the boyfriend doesn't do well. Then you've seen it everywhere. You've
Yeah.
seen your own life.
Yeah.
When your attachment doesn't get what it wants. When you're convinced that that meal will make you happy, the boy will make you happy, the new job will make you happy, the better shaped breast will make you happy. I mean, speaking kind of in a simple way, but it's very spontaneous, this response. You not notice that in yourself?
Yeah.
Okay, that's what we're talking about. Just, I mean, yeah. So, okay. Let's say I'm a normal, ordinary person, maybe more neurotic than normal. You're different, obviously. I'm not as neurotic as you. I'm more neurotic than you. It's a typical person who is, and this is not totally horrible. I know I use very blunt words, but try and hear the essence of what I'm saying. In other words, I'm a normal person who doesn't look at their mind, who assumes that, you know, the boyfriend did this, the job, just, and I mean ordinary, who assumes that that's where happiness is. So I find and I search and I find him, and we connect, and he's a nice guy, and and then we become together. And then naturally, see, attachment in the beginning, attachment is this over-exaggeration of his deliciousness, his beauty, and his job, and my expectation of his doing, of making me happy, basically. Pretty reasonable, isn't it? So as long as he behaves, okay, so there's two things going on here. One, we've got our neurotic states of mind, and I've only been describing those. But then at the same time, I've got access to my kindness, my love, my compassion, all the other qualities in me that we mix together as one normal part, but the Buddha makes this utter distinction between them. Do you understand what I'm saying? So I've got access to my virtue, my kindness, my patience. So maybe I'm a patient person, or maybe I'm very generous, maybe I'm very forgiving, maybe I'm very loving. Well, the Buddha's point is, the more my attachment and anger and jealousy and anxiety are prevailing, the more miserable I'll be, and the more my love, compassion, generosity and kindness prevail, the more happy I'll be. That's fairly, first of all, that's a pretty fundamental point. So then let's just say he does like the shape of other girls, he looks at other girls, but maybe I don't have a tendency to be jealous, which means I'll just laugh it off because I trust that he loves me and it won't be a big deal. We understand that, don't we? But let's say I've got a tendency to be jealous. So of course I don't think that my jealousy is the problem. This is the whole point. I don't think my jealousy is the problem. I believe that his action is the problem. Would you agree with that? Would you agree with that?
Yeah.
That's the point here. So the more strong my jealousy is, the more I believe he is this horrible person who's running around purposely looking at everybody else just to make me miserable. For example.
Let's say that he is just looking at the...
Darling, please just listen to me. I've got to go. You answered. I'm going to do a whole lot of analysis here. So sit back and relax and listen.
All right.
And then ask questions at the end. Okay?
All right.
I'm going to give a story. Let's say I'm put the microphone down and relax. I'm going to give an example of an ordinary, typical person who, and this is the point the Buddha's making, I know it sounds brutal, the very nature of ego is that we are victims. A victim is a person who doesn't have awareness of their own mind, who is not very conscious of what's happening in their own mind, always looking out there, lots of attachment, gets the person, and then gets lots of anger when he doesn't do what I want, gets lots of jealousy, lots of anxiety, lots of stress. This is not criticism. This is stating what we observe on the planet, you know. Normal, ordinary states of mind. Let's say I'm one of those people. So then naturally, first of all, I'm in love with Jabari. I'm in love with Jabari. That's mainly attachment. When attachment is fully blown, that's 99% of being in love. When I'm completely blissed out, he's divine looking, I believe I've found happiness, now I've finally found the answer to all my problems, and all these stories are going deep in my mind. We don't notice what, you know, I've already written this novel in my mind, but I don't notice, so I don't pay attention to this. I just believe what I feel. So I haven't been aware of my mind. I haven't observed what's going on. I don't know about these things. And I'm now believing 100% that now I've found happiness. Here's the answer to all my dreams. And I'm being sarcastic, but not being. Please hear me. So then as we get, and when you're living separately, you've got time to dress up and look beautiful and smell nice. But now we're going to live together. Guess what? I believe he loves me perfectly, so I'm going to walk around farting and picking my nose. Because, I mean, you hear my point. So suddenly, you know, I'm going to hear him, you know, not put the toilet seat down, then he's going to snore at night. Suddenly, this dream vision of divine person will start to get a bit less. I'll get annoyed with him. Oh, God, you know, this Jabari I didn't know before, but he snores all night. God, help me, you know. So what's that? That's typical human being. But when I was attached to him, only seeing a dream divine person, I didn't factor in snoring. I didn't factor in farting. Please hear my point. So attachment has this dream picture, this divine picture. And I can imagine we're together, as Nicole Kidman said. I always remember an article I read about Nicole Kidman when she was with Tom Cruise. She said at the end of the interview, we will be together until we're 80. Well, I don't know if you read the news, but Penelope Cruz came along and she took him. And they were not together until they're 80. So that's what attachment does, is this multifaceted imagination, creative part of my mind. We do not question that I believe he's divine. I believe I've found happiness. I believe we're here together. And whether it's the job or anything, this is an extreme example. So I'm a normal, ordinary person like that. And I've got some good qualities too, no question. They're my saving grace, you know. But what happens is the bigger the attachment, the bigger the fantasy that I never question, that every time, even the smallest thing he does, like snoring, that'll upset me. What that means is my attachment suddenly is disappointed because, you know, he did something normal. This sounds so silly as an example. But that called aversion arises. Aversion arises. And I'll crack a joke at breakfast. Oh, God, darling, you snore. And because he adores me and doesn't want me to upset, he'll say, oh, you know, well, nudge me when I do and I'll try not to snore. But day after day, he snores. So my annoyance grows every day. And then he doesn't come home on time and I get annoyed. And then my jealousy that I didn't even know I had before suddenly pops up. So I'm looking and noticing other people. So these are my states of mind. But my point is this. I don't think that they are coming from me. I think I'm this nice person, and suddenly he does things to upset me. So of course it's his fault. I don't ever look into my mind and observe the anger, the jealousy. So let's say it's really starts that we start to get fighting, and then you make up, and it's all gorgeous, but it builds up. Every day I get more annoyed, then I get jealous, then I talk about it to my sister, then I get, you know, I'm getting more unhappy, getting more unhappy, getting more unhappy. But never, never once thinking, wow, maybe I should look at my mind. Who thinks that thought? So then let's just say I'm miserable. And at some point, when people say, well, you know, you should leave the guy, Robina, this can't continue like this, you're going to fight every day, it's not working. But because of attachment, I run back like a moth to a flame. Now this can be to your job, it's exactly the same discussion. Suddenly the job is perfect and then you don't like the colleagues and they're mean to you, your boss is unkind, you don't get a good salary, you complain, you go home, you criticise, it builds up, the unhappiness builds, the unhappiness builds, the unhappiness builds, and the job looks terrible, the boss looks terrible, but you never question what's in here. So the point is this, that's the typical victim. That's how we all are to one degree or another. Join the universe, Buddha says. This is what he means by samsara. So that's typical. Now, in the normal world, you know, many people live their lives like that. That you might have a baby, then you have fights, and then it never occurs to you they should leave the guy. Oh no, I can't do that. I'm sure he really loves me, you know. Or, you know, I couldn't do that, my mother will criticise me. Oh, I couldn't do that, the world doesn't expect it. The world says you're supposed to stay with a person until the day you die. So most people live in misery, or they go to their job every day, they hate the job. You never think either you could leave the job or change your mind. It doesn't occur to us. That's the way a victim is. We blame the outside, but we walk back like a lemming every day. We go back to the job like a moth to a flame, never thinking. You go home and complain, you know. Let's say Jabari's fine, but I hate the boss. I come home every day, you know, he did this, he did that, he did this, the boss is ugly, and you go to work again the next day, and then 5 years later you go to work again the next day. Never thinking, I could have some control over this, I could make some decisions. That's what one broad point about the victim, which is what Buddha means by ego. The irony of ego is we are complete victims. We give all the power to the outside world. That means we have no power to make decisions, we have no courage to even know we could even change the job. I could even leave Jabari, forget about changing my mind. So there's only really two options when things go wrong. That's Buddha's point. Robina, if you can change it, please ask Jabari to stop looking at girls, ask him to stop snoring at night. If he can do it, you solve the problem. But what if it can't stop? What if it doesn't change? That's the point of practice. That's when practice starts. And at that point, maybe you realise the relationship's horrible, you're fighting all the time, you get so jealous, it's freaking out, you have a panic attack, you go to your therapist, then you have counselling, and you keep, I mean, it's like people live in nightmares. I'm not being sarcastic. So what's practice? Well, let's say I hear the Buddha says you can change your mind. Well, brand new idea to me. I mean, I didn't know that. I was brought up a Catholic. I was in love with God, in love with Our Lady, in love with the saints. I go to Mass every day. I knew the Mass in Latin. I was in heaven, you know. I was naughty as well. Then I gave up God and decided to have boys. So I became a hippie. Kind of God and boys both, so I became a hippie. Goodbye God, hello boys. Then I blamed all the straight people. I was completely, totally committed. Then I became a radical lefty and a communist. I always thought Romania was a nice country with Mr. whoever he was. Then I became a feminist. Then a radical feminist. Then I chucked out the boys and became a radical lesbian feminist. I was always looking for someone out there to blame for the world, for why the world is the way it is. And then when I was like 31, I bumped into these Tibetan Buddhists, and they said, you should look at your mind instead. I thought, oh, it's a brand new idea to me. I never heard of that. In one way saying, you know. So, in this relationship, suddenly, your attachment doesn't get what it wants every day because he's not a saint. He's going to be a normal person, but you don't factor that in. The job is not perfect. You don't factor that in because attachment is massive expectations as well, and it only sees perfection. It's not realistic. The key thing that Buddha says about all these neurotic states of mind is they're delusional. They're not realistic. They make a fantasy. So they exaggerate. So when I'm in love with Jabari, he looks divine. When I'm angry with him, he looks like a monster. But it's the same Jabari. He hasn't got any fatter in 24 hours. But 1 minute he looks revolting, 1 minute he's divine, because your mind's going up and down like a yo-yo. He's pretty stable, but my mind goes up all the time. So then, looking at your mind means this. I've got to make an assessment maybe. I've got to realise I can't stand this. It might be all my fault. I'm not complaining. I'm not saying he's even a bad person. But I can't say the jealousy's mine, the anger's mine. He might be doing bad things. That's the thing we've got to first be clear about. First establish the reality. Is he really cheating on me? Or is he not? Or is it just my unstable mind? Is it my own pain? So I've got to make a decision. So then I've got two options. I've got two options. Realise I can't cope. Realise I can't, it's not blaming him, but I can't cope with this. I can't cope with the up and down, so I have to make a decision to leave. That takes already enormous courage. But the first thing we say is, oh no, you can't, oh no, the world expects you to be together. Oh no, he really does love me. Oh no. We don't make choices. Now the other one is, if I realise I can't handle it, and I realise there's maybe nothing more in this relationship that's left, I leave him. Or if I do decide there's something worthwhile, I've got to decide that, then I start to work on my mind. Then I decide that my mind plays as much role as he does. So that's powerful. That's where you start to own what's in here. So then maybe I've got to see the reality that maybe he looks at girls, but he really still does love me, and we're prepared to be together. So I'm going to work on my jealousy. I'm going to look at the jealousy, and this is the point now, not just the feeling of the jealousy, that's the tip of the iceberg. That's the wheels falling off. I've got to go delve in deep, not past, but down in, and hear the conceptual story that is jealousy. Or anger, let's say. So what's the conceptual story of anger? How dare he do that to me? Like this indignation, isn't it? That's anger. How dare he do this to me? So then I've got to look at that assumption and ask myself what is faulty about that assumption. Then I've got to look at what anger is, which is the response when the deeper assumption of attachment. And attachment is this hubris. Attachment is this junkie in me that assumes I only deserve the good things, and he had better give me the good things every time. That's the assessment of attachment. That's the real assumption to question. Well, you check, well, who says that's true? What do you mean? Why should I get what I want every second? It's a really arrogant assumption. I mean, this sounds kind of brutal to us because it's so normal. And it's hard to hear these words in our own mind. It's hard to hear these assumptions. So we've got to question the assumption. But what we notice is the emotion, and because the story is real, I believe in it, I never question the assumptions. That's the job that's really hard to do. So then I might decide, if I do decide, I've got to decide what I want first. So I decide I'm prepared to stay. I want to work on it. Then you work on your mind. Maybe you can compromise, maybe you can go to your therapist, maybe whatever. But the real job is working on your mind. Maybe you don't expect him to work on his mind. That's his business. And this is hard too. Because I think he should change as well. Because I'm determined to know that maybe I'm part of it, but he's part of it. It's true, he is. I mean, was the one with the boss. Let's say you really feel there's no way you can get another job at the moment. That might be possible. So you stop complaining. This is the real point. If you keep complaining, you hate the boss, you hate the college, you've not enough money. Every day you go to work, you're miserable, and you don't realise you can't. That you could, you know, let's say you decide. You've got to decide first. I'm not going to change the job. You own the fact that you've chosen to not change the job. Then the real work starts. So given that I'm choosing to stay in the job, let's now see how I can see the best things about it and stop complaining about the boss, stop being angry all the time, and that's what's so difficult. That's unbelievably difficult. So we keep going back to work and we keep complaining, not realising we can change the job, nor realising we can change our view of the job. We stay like victims. Are we communicating at all here? So seeing this process to whatever degree it is in all of us, because join the universe here, we're all in samsara, we've all got attachment, all got aversion, all got upset in some way or another. We mostly just take it for granted and we just keep doing it. And then we keep blaming. And we go mad one day. What else? You know? Kill yourself or kill your body. Are we communicating at all? I know I make it sound like so dramatic, you know, so I'm so dramatic how I talk. This is how delusions work. So the key point I'm making about the victim one is you don't feel you have any control. You feel that someone else made you, you're plonked on this earth, it's not your fault, your mother's mean, your daddy's mean, the government's mean, and this is that, it's not my fault, poor me. And it sounds very brutal to call anger and attachment symptoms of being a victim, but they are. And a victim means you're paralysed, you don't have any control. So beginning to take responsibility and realising these are my mind, this is my jealousy, this is my anger, this is my hurt, this is my attachment. Yes, he's got his problems. That's his problem. What's mine? That's the most immediate way to approach. And we understand this. You've got a good therapist, they'll tell you the same thing. Buddha doesn't own this stuff. That's what I mean by natural law. He didn't create all this. He's good at it, that's all. This is his expertise. Taking responsibility of what the hell is in our own mind. Owning it is mine. He might be a creep. It's true, he might be. And in fact, look at the world. Terrible things happen to us. And people do terrible things to each other. That's not denied here. It's not saying you don't look at the outside. I absolutely have to look at the outside. And then I make my choices on the basis of it. This is why for me I found it very powerful working with people in prison. I was based in the States, I sort of am still. I've got an American passport, as well as Australian, as well as British. And when I went to get my citizenship in America, I remember the woman said to me, I said to her, can I keep my other passports? She said, we don't mind how many passports you have, as long as you have allegiance to the United States. So I think it means I'm supposed to feel like an American. I'm not sure if I do, but never mind. But the point is I was based in California and I was editing our Buddhist magazine, it was in the 90s. And I got a letter from one young Mexican-American boy from Los Angeles. He was in prison, in a prison called Pelican Bay, which was renowned for its strict security scenario. So he told me he was 18, he'd been in prison since he was 12, in juvenile, and then before that he was in gangs since he's 11, and he's now 18. Well, he just got out now, he's like 40, you know, he's an amazing guy. Anyway, his name was Arturo, and he read a book of Lama Yeshe's, and the address of our magazine was in the book, and so he wrote to me. That was the first letter I got. So I was very moved by this letter, so I sent him a book, you know, and within a year I had 40 people writing, and so this is how this project, Liberation Prison Project, started. It's still going, but I ran it for like 15 years. I stopped 10 years ago. I still know many of my friends in prison. But what was a very powerful experience for me, because people in prison, especially in America, the United States, with respect, I mean, you know, they have 5%, America has 5% of the world population. It's got 25% of the prison population of the planet. A quarter of all humans on the planet who live in prison live in American prisons. And I'm sure it's not getting better with Mr. Trump, you know. So it's kind of intense, and the system there is just pretty intense, I'll tell you. If you have Netflix, you watch a movie called 13th. It's mind-boggling of the intensity of the prison system. Have you seen that movie, Tabari? You know, heard of it?
13th Amendment, right?
Yeah, it's about that. It was amazing female filmmaker.
I heard about it, yeah.
It's incredible.
I understand the concept.
Unbelievable. It's an unbelievable movie. Anyway, it's very astonishing. Anyway, for me, what's so powerful, because the sentencing is so severe. I mean, there's Arturo. He didn't kill anybody. He was in gangs, you know. He got 3 life sentences. He's finally out because he worked so hard. most 2/3 of his life being in prison. So the point is that people in prison, whether on death row, I've got friends on death row in Kentucky, I've got many people, I still write to many of them and visit many of them. But the thing that's so powerful for me about people in prison, they don't have the luxury of changing. Oh, I'd like to leave now, where's the key? Sorry, you don't have that. So this is the point here. This is the point that I find very powerful. These friends of mine in prison, the ones who like Buddhism and who've practiced, whether on death row or with Arturo with, 3 life sentences and many other people in the same situation, when they won't get out of prison, they can't anticipate anything changing. They can't anticipate leaving. So you learn to know you can't, your back's against the wall. The only thing you can change is your mind. And when it says change your mind, that means changing your conceptions, changing your opinions about your scenario. I always use one example, one woman. I didn't know this woman, I read a memoir briefly, and she's an extreme example, but it's showing exactly my point. I read a memoir briefly. She's this woman in Florida, hippie, basic hippie with a hippie husband, hippie kids in the 70s, hitching in Florida. Gets picked up by 2 guys. The guys get stopped by the police. The guys kill the police, 2 men, 2 policemen, and then blame the hippie. So they're on death row in Florida. And you're worse than an animal if you're on death row in Florida for killing a policeman, right? So this nightmare, she was in prison for 17 years. The husband got it. First of all, her 3 children were given to her parents, so she thought they were safe. She was happy about that. Then the parents got killed in a car accident. So the kids are thrown off into the system. She loses her kids. The husband gets executed. I mean, think of our lives when we are accused of something we didn't do. Look at the stress, the pain, the hurt. We can, maybe 20 years ago we haven't got rid of it. We haven't let go of it. It's so unfair, we think about, isn't it? This woman, on death row, husband executed. After 17 years, she finally got out. She was an amazing woman. Anyway, the point is this. She said, at some point, I realized I couldn't change anything. But they couldn't take my mind from me. So I decided, I'm not a prisoner, I'm a monk. I'm not in a cell, I'm in a cave. I don't think she was a Buddhist, I think she did yoga and things. But that view, this is a dramatic, extreme example of exactly what I'm talking about here. That when we realize that all these emotions and feelings in us, which we believe are these powerful things that are absolutely rock solid, that when we go beyond them, to hear the conceptual story in them, their opinions. So she basically, or their viewpoints about something. So she had this extraordinary ability, emotional intelligence. She must have not had much anger, I think, in her mind. That she was able to realize there was no benefit in going crazy. There was no benefit in bashing her head against a brick wall. There was no benefit in being angry and going mad, which is typical. We assume we don't have a choice. That's the point I'm making. A person who hates you, hate your job, you hate your husband, you just assume, if you're the victim mode, one assumes there is no choice. I don't have a choice. Life is a disaster. That's the tragedy. This woman had this astonishing ability. Many of my friends in prison is the same. My friend on death row in Kentucky, Rich, 30 years on death row. He was not a monster. He had guns, you have drugs, you have death, So he's on death row, and finally all his appeals are finished. And I've known him for like 25 years. He's an incredible human being. He's an ordinary, nice, white southern boy, killed somebody because of drugs. His friends in prison as well. 3 people died. So he's going to die. He said, I'm ready for that electric jolt, Robina. He's an ordinary dude, who's really works well in his mind, lives in his red jumpsuit all day with his 40 other people on death row, his friends. He's this human being who's come to terms with this reality, changed his own view, changed his mind. An amazing human being. Living in some shithole, So for me, I found it so inspiring. If you can change something, if you can walk out of prison, go. If I can leave Jabari, leave. If you can leave your job, leave it. If you can't cope with your mother might be the most neurotic mother on the planet. It's possible. People are neurotic. And maybe even your mother, though we think it's so outrageous, how dare my mother be neurotic. We have this hubris that we assume you all should have a saint for a mother. If you really can't handle her, have the courage to know you can't handle her and don't visit her. But we go back like moths to a flame, continuing to complain about your mother, continue to complain about the job, continue to be miserable. This is the way ego is. This is the irony of ego. we don't feel we have any power to have any control or choices in our life. That's the suffering of having lots of attachment, lots of aversion, lots of depression, lots of anxiety, lots of stress. And in our culture, we consider it a normal part of a normal person, so we don't ever question the possibility that I can change my mind. We always try to change the thing, and then we continue to be victims if the thing doesn't change. So it's a practical issue, not moralistic, not judgmental, not punitive. It's practical. Are we communicating?
Yes.
Thank you. And you're the beneficiary. So it takes courage. I mean, that woman, that's an outrageous comment to make. I mean, that's so stunning that she was able to do that. So the point is, this is the point too. She didn't ever give up trying to get her freedom. She got freedom eventually. And this is the interesting point. At the same time, I read about another fellow on death row, and this is normal, who was completely innocent. I mean, every day in the US press, you read about innocent people, 20 years, 30 years, living in hell, and they're completely innocent. I mean, it's everywhere, I'm sure. And this guy, he went completely out of his brain, screaming daily, I did not rape and kill that woman. Now, the fact is, each of them was innocent. Each of them didn't do the things they were accused of. One of them, for whatever miraculous reason, based on her own mind, her own courage, her own clarity, she had the capacity to find a way to see this situation that she could benefit from it without losing her brain. The other guy, like the rest of us, like most people on this planet, could not see any possibility than to go completely crazy. Now, in our world, we go, yeah, we understand why he's like that. Look at what they did to him. And it's true, it is appalling, it's monstrous. It is no question, it is monstrous what happened to him. But the point that Buddha's making, and we're not even going into karma, we're going to talk about that later, which is the Buddha's explanation for how come you'll be wrongly accused, how come you're on death row unfairly, or how come you have any happiness at all. Buddha's view is this business of karma, which is a very powerful one for us. We'll discuss that later, that's the bigger picture. But here this is without any view of karma, or even this is even about whether your mind is your brain or your toenail, I don't care. We know we've got thoughts, and we know we can change them. And this is the real point. This does not need the analysis of whether your mind's your brain. It doesn't need the analysis of where you come from and karma or creator. This is a really practical issue, you know. Having enough courage to notice and having enough courage to realize that you are the beneficiary of learning methods to get less stressed, less angry, less depressed, less jealous. But you have to own those things as yours, not always hold on to, but it's not my fault, I'm allowed to be jealous. That's the illogic of ego, so you stay paralyzed. That guy, it's like, I mean, almost you could say to him, well, you've got some methods. This guy who's out of his brain, suffering intensely. Well, you could get less angry. He would not be able to hear you because he's suffering so intensely. If he's abusing me and beating me up every day, to have a therapist say, Robina, you could change your mind, you could sue the therapist for being so outrageous, But he's wrong. I'm allowed to be angry. He's wrong. And this shows the depth of the suffering of ego, which is victim. When people can be living in a prison, imprisoned by monstrous parents, monstrous partners. No one's locking the front door. But this is the depth of the suffering of this victim mentality we all have. Listen, these are just my words. Buddha doesn't use the term victim mentality. We can hear this. And look at the suffering. You don't need to be locked in. If he's really dominating me, and I'm such a victim, it's so much suffering, and it's real suffering, he doesn't have to lock me in. Because I'm completely imprisoned by my own delusions, by my own neuroses. This is the real suffering. So to go beyond this is pretty powerful. Like that woman said, they couldn't take my mind from me. That's pretty astonishing. And I think she's a really rare person. So I happened to read about her later, and she got out after 17 years, and now she's living, she went to Ireland, I think, to some Amnesty International conference, and she met this Irish fellow who'd have been accused by the British of killing 2 policemen during all the Troubles, and so they fell in love, and now they're running a retreat centre in Cork, and I think they come to the States as well. They're both like 80 now, kind of old and white hair, very sweet people, running retreats for people who've been wrongly accused in prison. They're very amazing human beings. But the point is this also, a very practical point. The simple point of this, the practical issue of this, when you're angry and overwhelmed by anxiety, overwhelmed by depression, you can't do anything. You're paralyzed. You can't do anything. You can't do anything. This guy, he could do nothing but go mad. He probably couldn't lift a finger to do one practical thing to help himself get freedom, because his mind was completely gone. But she was able to continue never giving up on her freedom, because she kept her sanity. This is not easy work. This is powerful stuff, this. But my key point here, one of the key points, when you really do have an analysis, which is the materialist analysis, and I mean materialist being a serious name for a particular philosophical view. It's the view we have in the world. It's not the Christian one, not the Muslim one, not the Buddhist one, the materialist one, which is that I'm made by my mummy and daddy. They give me anger, and then people unfairly give me bad things. So that view, the more we look into those things, and it tells us why the guy's angry. It's like looking at the animals, and it tells us why there's this and that. But what good does it do? Well, how does it help you deal with it? It doesn't help you. It just reinforces, now we know why he's angry. But how does it tell you to get rid of anger? The only solution is get him out of prison. But he can't get him out of prison. So then you're stuck with the anger. That's the terror of this view that I'm a victim, that I have no possibility to change. We do have the possibility. It doesn't mean it's easy. It's the hardest thing we'll ever damn well do. But that's the point here. So don't wait till you're accused of murdering some policeman. Don't wait till, your husband abuses you. Don't wait till the wheels fall off before we start with the inside. And then again, that's our point too. You go to your therapist and you got annoyed that day. Oh, I got annoyed today. Well, shut up and stop complaining and go home, You only want to go to the therapist when the wheels are falling off, when you want to kill your husband. But that's too late. The Buddha's view is we can start to look into our mind before it becomes serious. Because stuff's happening in the mind all the time, at a subtler level. But we don't pay attention. Because we only pay attention when the body's involved and when the wheels are falling off. So it's just literally too late. It's not too late, but it's kind of like too late. But if you dealt with your mind every day and dealt with the little annoying things that we think are not important, but because the Buddha's view is everything gets stored in there, these habits of annoyance build up. Of years and years of build up until one day the straw will break the camel's back. So even paying attention to that idea, that everything you think and do and say does count. That's the Buddha's view. Every millisecond of your thoughts are producing the person you become. Forget long-term past lives and future lives, which is the big picture of karma, but in day-to-day life it's evident. Like I said, if you just get angry every day and even no one ever hears you, who do you think you're producing? What kind of person do you think you're producing? This shows how schizophrenic we are if we think I'm allowed to be angry, like as if it doesn't have an effect upon you. I mean, excuse me. We're so demented we're convinced that he did it to me. I mean, it's really weird. He did do it to me. But the anger's the one that's causing me suffering, not him. That's the point. That's hard to hear. We have this kind of nihilistic view that it doesn't matter what I think. Doesn't matter means it doesn't have effect. It's very fascinating. I remember looking at the New York Times one day on my iPad. I read all these newspapers. And I saw a story, a woman in Brooklyn got into her husband's computer and discovered that he was part of a cannibal site and they were preparing to kill and eat her. Well, she got a shock, So she didn't call the police, she called the FBI, sort of more serious. And the point is this. His lawyer, and lawyers are meant to be intelligent people, lawyer's position, the lawyer's defense, he is allowed to think this. That doesn't mean he's going to do it. That doesn't mean, in other words, he's allowed to think this because we think the mind is this secret kind of special little kind of place in here that you can do anything you want, have as many fantasies, think of killing as many people, think of having sex with as many children as you like, stealing, lying. It's our fantasy world, we call it. And we don't think it has any impact upon the person we are. This is so stunning and shocking, but that's what we think. That's why as long as no one knows what I'm thinking, it doesn't matter. That's really quite schizophrenic, actually. The Buddha's view is so practical. Every millisecond of every single thought in you is not just that it counts, that actually that is the main thing that produces the person you become. That's the meaning of karma. It's kind of obvious if you think about it. But we're convinced there's stuff out there that produces the person I become. Of course it has a role. This is the main player. What goes on in here with the Buddha is the main player. So we need to become intimately familiar with it. And that's the expertise of these Indians before the Buddha. And this is not known in our world. This view is not known in our world. We just think it's these weird, wacko, hippie Hindus and Buddhists, you know. We're so insulting and arrogant in our materialist world. It's an astonishingly sophisticated view, the way they talk about the mind. And you map it internally. Internally, it's the cognitive process itself, the subjective cognitive process itself. And that's Buddhists say we can unpack and unravel it and radically reconfigure the conceptual stories in our mind to the point where we are rid of the neurotic ones and completely full of the valid ones. That's the approach. It's a very, very different way of talking. So, these three main ones. The neurotic primordial sense of a separate I, which gives rise to this massive emotional hunger that really is so subtle within us and is there all the time. That is this dissatisfaction, this hunger, this manipulating to get something, exaggerating its deliciousness, massive expectation, massive possessiveness. This is all the different functions of this attachment, depending on the time, the place, the person, the object, etc. And then aversion, the response when attachment is thwarted, when attachment doesn't get what it wants every millisecond. Again, the whole spectrum. Either as annoyance, irritation, frustrated, stress, worry, anxiety, all that stuff, you know, or violent anger, or primordial depression. This whole spectrum. And this is happening all the time. And then that gives rise to all the other dramas. The jealousy, all the business, you know. So one of the key problems then, if it is our job, the Buddhist view, to recognize these neurotic stories in here and to argue with them, to learn to reconfigure our mind, then we clearly have to learn to distinguish between the so-called neurotic ones and the so-called valid ones. So using a really simple example, the same scenario, you know, Jabari. I have attachment to him, I have lots of aversion, I have jealousy, I have all the other dramas, my own suffering, but I also do happen to have love. And what is love? Love is under the positive heading, and love is this valid state of mind. And I'll discuss that later, why it's valid. That is connected to him, and when I see him happy, I'm delighted he's happy. And I want him to be happy. That's the definition of love in Buddhism. It's an altruistic state of mind that is connected to another that delights when he's happy. I have compassion for him, which is empathy with his suffering. So love and compassion are like the essence of the positive states of mind, the way Buddhist psychology describes it. So clearly, I do have love. I do want him to be happy, guaranteed. I do have empathy when he's suffering. Absolutely, I do. But this is the problem. I can't distinguish between the attachment to Jabari and the love for Jabari. And because the trouble is, you're only attached to the people you love, and you only have love for those you're attached to. So we conflate them. We can't tell the difference. We cannot tell the difference, you know. But this is the job. And it's extremely subtle, extremely hard. Because when I'm attached to a certain person, they look divine, that triggers very delicious feelings. There's a real sense of closeness, which is a result of that. But any benefit that comes from the relationship is from the love and the compassion. As long as he does what my attachment wants, as long as he does every millisecond exactly what my attachment wants, you know, and he looks at me adoringly every day and doesn't ever snore at night and doesn't fart in the sheets instead of the toilet and always puts the toilet seat down, and I mean, I'm not trying to be sarcastic again, then I'll continue to want him to be happy because he's making me happy. But I'm sorry, when he starts not doing the things that my attachment wants, what do you think you start getting annoyed for? Because he doesn't do what my attachment wants. So as he keeps not doing what my attachment wants, as he keeps doing what I don't want, that I'm going to get jealous, I'm going to get angry, I'm going to feel hurt, and I'm going to not want him to be happy. And eventually I will, you know, he'll leave me or I'll leave him. And then he's in, you know, there's three categories of sentient beings. We have objects of our attachment, they're called friends. We have objects of aversion, they're called enemies. You might use that word, but it's the person who doesn't do what you want. And then we have 99.99% of the universe, and they're in the category called stranger. So we couldn't care less about strangers, we wish the enemy would suffer, and we want the friend to be happy. We don't question that assumption either. When we look more into the compassion wing, we really do some analysis to see how those three categories are completely ego-based. We should be embarrassed by them. We see the world through the lenses of our needs. So as long as those who do what I want, they're called friends, then I adore them and I have compassion for them. They're the only ones. When he leaves me for a younger version, I'm sorry, overnight he joins the enemy category. And my love and my compassion have turned off like a tap. We don't question that. And strangers, well, they could all drop dead as far as I'm concerned. They don't affect my life because they've neither harmed nor helped me. It's a really kind of interesting analysis, you know. And these are the objects of these three main delusions. The objects of ignorance are the strangers, the objects of aversion are the enemies, and the objects of attachment are the friends. So we do have love and compassion, but only for that one group. Or for innocent victims. A few children and a few animals, that's about it. So the Buddha's idea, especially the Mahayana path, the Bodhisattva path, when we go to the compassion wing, once we've stabilised ourselves in the wisdom wing, lessened our neuroses, grown our marvellous potential, which means we become a more marvellous, content, happy person, then we can afford to realise, oh my God, the world's in the same place. And you've now got ability to want to be able to benefit other sentient beings as well. Because we're all driven by aversion, jealousy, pain, suffering, blah, blah, blah. You know? We can then learn to have love and compassion for everybody, not just the ones who make us happy. That's kind of huge. That's more advanced. So first we really work on ourselves. So it's really hard to distinguish between, say, attachment and love. It's really hard to distinguish between, say, anger and compassion. Like you look at the world. When I was an old radical lefty, you know, I mean, I was full of idealism. I wanted to change the world. Now, first I was Catholic and a hippie, then became back in the 60s in London when I was involved in radical left movement, 60s and early 70s. And then involved with all the supporting of the Black Panthers, whatever reason. I was working in a group called the Friends of Soledad, and that was connecting with people in prison, especially in America, you know, the time of the Panthers. There was this particular book written by somebody about this group in London supporting. And then I became a feminist, so I changed my views of who was suffering. First it was all the poor people, then it was black people, then it was female people, you know. So I was always wanting to make the world a better place. I was always kind of idealistic. But I couldn't tell the difference between attachment and the nobility in me, or anger. So there's massive anger. How dare those people do that to those people? You have compassion for this group, and then because the analysis we use is they're suffering because of those people, and on the face of it it's true, they are. Females are harmed by males in certain ways. Well, absolutely, in the States, let's say, black people suffer at the hands of white people or whatever. So these dichotomies are real. So I'd have anger, I have compassion for this group, but anger for that group. So that's very common. If we look at the suffering in the world, environmentalism, for example, you see the suffering, and the first thing we do is, who's to blame? And then we've got to have an equal amount of anger for the people who do all the trouble. The rich ones, the oil companies, blah, blah, blah. So we have compassion for this group, but because of our analysis of finding someone to blame for it, and there is a logic to that. They are the ones who are doing the oil companies, blah, blah, it's true. Then we have anger. But we don't have a choice, you know. I remember Martin Luther King, outrageous what he said. He said, it's good to find fault. It's good to see there's environmental suffering. He didn't say that then, it was not that time. There's racism, there's sexism, there's injustice. You must say that. You must see that. That's not anger, that's intelligence. But then you say, what can I do to help? That's compassion. But we mix compassion with anger. I mean, when I was a radical lefty in politics for 10 years, it was always full of rage and anger. And I thought it was so noble, you know. And we assume, oh, you must get angry, otherwise you won't care. Again, that's a false analysis. Martin Luther King's response was amazing. Don't just rant and rave and get angry. See the problem. This is the compassion wing now. See the problem, and then say, what can I do to help? That's profound. So we've got the wisdom wing, which is dealing with the states of mind and ourself, in our relationships, etc. And the compassion wing is the ability to help others. So, for example, let's say you even just got an alcoholic brother in your own family. You've got lots of love for your brother. You love him. You want him to be happy. You have compassion. You want him not to suffer. But what you don't realise is your own attachment is the one that gets upset. You don't suffer because you've got compassion. You suffer because you've got attachment. So your attachment only wants your brother to be to behave nicely. And how dare he? The attachment's really upset because your brother's not upsetting your attachment, not getting what you want. So you get angry, you get upset with him. But we think it's compassion, so you barge in, stick your nose in where it doesn't belong, and you try to bully him into stop being an alcoholic, acting like it's compassion. Well, there is some compassion there, but it's mainly driven by your own anger, your own annoyance, your own attachment. We don't see that. again, the point here is it doesn't mean your mother doesn't have problems. It doesn't mean if he whacks me, he's not doing the right thing. He is doing the wrong thing. It doesn't mean that when people suffer at the hands of brutality and everything, that they're not being brutalized. They are being. But that's why my friends in prison are such powerful examples, because they don't have the luxury. Please leave me alone, guard. You know, no, it doesn't work like that. Do you understand? And that really, for me, proves the power of the mind. That when your back is against the wall, we're surprising how much power we do have, you know. Do you understand? So what do you, yeah, go. Tabari. Microphone. Are we communicating here, people?
Yes.
Okay, go.
Would you say there's many minds or only one mind?
Say it again.
Would you say there's many minds or
Yeah,
only
trillions,
one
of,
mind?
as many sentient beings as you can point out. All the ants, all the bugs, they're all individual minds.
But I didn't ask about sentient beings, I'm talking in general. Are there many minds or one mind?
I just answered it. I said there's trillions.
But we all have the same mind.
Go closer, darling.
But we all have the same mind.
We are similar, but we're not the same mind. Okay. We all have the same.
Within the context of, then how does Buddhism, therapy, all these different types of avenues, treatments, they're able to prescribe the same type of thing
Yes, that's right.
to individual people
Absolutely, yes.
with different minds,
That's right.
but the same structure.
The same problems. All
And
the same problems.
And the same solutions.
And the same solutions.
So then the minds are the same.
No, that's I think that's an exaggeration.
How?
Okay. The Buddha's view is about the mind. It's time for lunch soon. The Buddha's analysis of consciousness of the mind, the Buddhist model of the mind, actually refers to all sentient beings. And the word sentient being in Tibetan is very tasty. It's mind possessor. So humans are a tiny percentage. There are animals and creatures and bugs and the mosquitoes and all the creatures and the fish, and they're all sentient beings as well. And this is where we're going to get into karma and reincarnation later as the bigger picture of Buddhist philosophy that extends what we're describing here. That this view of the mind refers to all these trillions and trillions of sentient beings. So in Buddha's view is the suffering of animals, the suffering of humans, we're all the same. But there's a question of degree, you know. The analysis I'm giving here is the same for animals and for other sentient beings that the Buddha would say exist that we can't even see. So, one point. Second point. All minds, as far as Buddha's found, from his own experience, he says he's achieved this result of Buddha, Sangye, rid his mind utterly of all neuroses and developed his virtues to perfection. So that's the meaning of Buddha. He says he's done that job, and he says he's found from his own experience that that's the natural potential of every single mind. Every Hitler's mind, every ant's mind, every dog's mind. It doesn't mean every sentient being has the conditions in which they can accomplish that, but that potential is always in the mind. And they go that into quite extensively. And the key logic in the Buddhist view is that he has found that all these neuroses, all this ego grasping, the root delusion, and then all the others they are conceptual states of mind deep in our bones, but they're not in the nature of mind itself. The very nature of mind itself is pure and clear. I use the analogy like water. By definition, water is H2O. 2 bits of H, 1 bit of O. And we know it have lots of pollution in it. But we know, even without being scientists, and as a simple analogy, you can remove the pollution. The pollution is not integral to the water. You can identify and extract the pollution. And what's left is pure H2O. It's a bit like that for our mind. That virtue and intelligence and all the positive qualities in the Buddhist analysis of the mind are actually at the core of our being. They're like our H2O. And there's very logical reasons for that, and we'll go into that later. And then the other stuff is like adventitious, it's extra, it's bells and whistles, it's unnecessary. And we can extract them from the mind. So in that sense, all our minds are the same. And you could argue, when you've achieved that perfection, and I've achieved that perfection, your consciousness, which is not physical, is finally unencumbered by all neuroses. You could argue that your mind and my mind are the same mind then. You could argue that. But right now, because of all the afflictions and delusions, we have created all these separate trillions of beings running around, which creates, so the strong ego grasping, which assumes a separate sense of a neurotic me, then already assumes others, and that's the final dualism that Buddha says will go when you finally achieve Buddhahood. So finally, you could argue when all achieve perfection, there's like one mind. But at the moment, we're all these individual separate minds, and the simple logic for that, Jabari, is when you play piano every day, who gets better at piano? You. I don't get better at piano, do I? I've got to practice it. So every time you're angry every day, every time you're loving every day, every time you study mathematics every day, you're the beneficiary of that. That proves your mind is not my mind. Because if you could study piano and I could play piano, thank you very much. I'll sit back and relax.
So if the mind is non-physical, therefore it's non-local, and we're
No, not, it is local. It's local in this body, right here, right now. Jabari is sitting on that seat.
But it's non-physical.
No, your consciousness is conjoined with that body.
So, like, conjoining means taking two separate things and making them one together.
That's right, exactly.
So then, if you two separate things, the body and the
They're
mind.
two separate things conjoined. The Buddhist analysis of this, especially in the Vajrayana teachings, talk about the trillions of consciousnesses, like I said, and they all inextricably linked to their own set of the four elements. They always say this is the way it is. And this is where we get into karma later. But your consciousness is conjoined. You've got gross consciousness, which is conjoined with your body. Then you've got this gross body. Then you've got subtle consciousness, we don't posit that, conjoined with these subtler physical energies, and they go into great detail about that. That's described in the Tibetan medical system. The Hindus talk about that in yoga. The subtle physical energies, inextricably linked. Inextricably linked. And then there's even very subtle level of consciousness, inextricably linked to this very subtle physical energies. That's how they describe it. That's their model.
So if we can all enter the same,
Bit louder, darling.
if we can all enter into the same states,
Yes.
then those states must exist outside of us. Those states must exist.
No, the potential for those states exists within every mind. The
So
potential
the
for
potential
those
for
states,
but not the states.
pardon?
The potential for the states, but not the
The
states.
potential clearly exists. The states aren't fully, an acorn possesses the potential to be an oak tree. You've got to give it the right conditions. Every mind possesses the potential to be less deluded and more positive.
But we could switch that and say the oak tree already exists within the acorn.
No, it doesn't. Try to get shade from an acorn, baby.
How to get what and where?
What?
I'm sorry, I didn't
Try to
get
get shade from an acorn. You'll be disappointed.
Okay, so I'm trying to equate the states with maybe like Jungian archetypes, right?
What?
Archetypes.
This is not like a philosophical, this is an experiential thing we're discussing. That's not working here.
It's not working.
No, not archetypes.
So if we can all enter into a state of jealousy, a state of anger.
If what?
If we can all enter into a state of jealousy or a state of
It's because
anger,
we've got the potential.
but all those states have the same characteristic.
Of course they do. That's why I can recognize them. That's why I first recognize mine, and then I can help you because you've got the same. Absolutely.
So then the states can be argued to be pre-existent.
Of course they're pre-existent the moment before.
Okay, so
The
then,
potential for them is existent.
okay, so then how do we differentiate mind from consciousness? If mind
They're the
is not
same
physical?
word, same meaning. Conscious mind are the same in Buddhism.
Okay, so then consciousness is what exists.
Consciousness is your mind, and it's your capacity for cognition. And it's beginningless and endless. At the moment, it's polluted by delusions, and your job is to remove the delusions so you can get in touch with the virtue and wisdom and clarity and become a Buddha. And then you can help me do it once you've done it. It's a question about getting clear on definitions of terms, isn't it?
No, it definitely is.
Yeah, that's right. So I'm trying to give you the Buddhist ones here. We can learn the Buddhist logic, and then you can put the two together. It's lunchtime.
Can I have a short question?
Yeah, one more question. Come on.
Yeah, it's.
Okay, darling.
I'm more
Go.
like a science.
Microphone.
I'm more like a science background.
Microphone, darling.
Yeah, I'm waiting for. So my background is a little bit more scientist.
Yes, of course.
And so I think.
You mean the
I don't
physical?
know.
You're involved with the physical world.
Yes.
That's right.
I can say
Nothing
that.
wrong. Go on.
So I can say that in maybe you can clarify for me. So you are saying that actually the mind is, or like the thinking, or the potential for thinking is something like gravity
No.
in the physical world.
No.
It's something which exists,
Oh.
and so that's why is, for example, gravity. It's a fundamental force. And the intensity depends on the mass of some planet or some object or something like that. But if you can get rid of all these physical things, the gravity still exists. So that's in that way, I think it's very similar to the.
Oh, you're losing me a bit, honey. It's a bit too intellectual. I mean, a bit too complex. I don't understand the logic of what that one. Can you say another one?
I'm trying
What's the
to.
point
I'm
you're
trying to
trying to
think about the point he was making,
About
that there are some fundamental things like anger, love, which are common to all the minds,
Yes.
which are actually, he was trying to say that if they're outside the minds, and I'm saying yes,
I don't know,
there's
but
something
just
like
say what you're-
gravity, there are
just try-
some
what-
fundamental elements.
Maybe if you could ask me a question, it might be more helpful.
So this is my
It's a statement. I want a question.
my question is,
What's your
do you
question?
think that you can think of the mind, the idea of the mind, as something similar to the physics,
No,
like
that
the
loses-
gravity?
No, that's meaningless words for me. So that's not a question, that's a statement, and I can't get that at all. I have no way to answer that question. Not a possibility. All I can tell you is this, the words I'm trying to use. Okay. If you're a sentient being, you're a mind possessor. This is the Buddha's view. That means you have certain mind and you have a certain level of physicality. A monkey is a mind possessor. A dog is a mind possessor. A fish is a mind possessor. They're all different kinds of bodies, and that's all due to karma. We'll talk about that later. So all of us, the thing that distinguishes me from a microphone, that's physical matter as well, no difference. Or distinguishes from a flower or whatever. That's the four elements. This is the four elements, but this is conjoined with a consciousness. That's the difference. So consciousness or mind are the words used synonymously to refer to what we would express as the cognitive process, capacity to cognize something, the capacity to feel, the capacity to know. And that's including simply bare bones sensory consciousness or the conceptual at the level we function at now, which is thoughts as well as feelings and emotions. So there's the component of an emotion when I'm angry is the physical shouting and yelling, right? Spit coming out, words, sound coming out the mouth. That is the physical manifestation of what's in my mind, which is called anger. And that's a conceptual story, deeply practiced, deeply habitual, deeply instinctive, because I've practiced it for so long, that's actually outrage when the attachment, which is even deeper in the mind, isn't getting what it wants. So that's all the cognitive part of us, and that's the consciousness, that's the mind, that's its function.
Okay. So exactly something
Well,
like
if
that.
that works
I
for your
think
mind, then I'm very happy.
that the
So I don't
mind
think-
or consciousness is actually a fundamental element, which is
Oh, it's the basic building
it's a
block.
basic building
There's
block
two
of
things
the
in the
universe.
universe, minds
Yes.
and matter. That's it for the Buddha.
So
Minds and matter.
exactly. So it's
So
like
that's,
gravity,
well, that's
something
fine.
fundamental. So
Oh, okay, so it's, yeah, okay, if you like, I see your point.
that was my
Oh, no,
question.
you
So
get
do
the
you
point.
see
I get
this
it.
as something fundamental?
Utterly fundamental.
That's-
For you, in fact, the Buddha,
Okay.
minds are everything. Minds create universes. Minds create hell experiences and
Exactly.
blissful experiences and happiness and suffering. And that's why he focuses on the mind. That we can do whatever we want, because mind literally creates reality. Your first question. No, her first question. Oh, you do. Go on.
I have a question. Coming back to the practical example that you gave with the attention that we give to the outer
Yeah.
object
Sure.
of our
Yeah.
anger or dissatisfaction.
That's right.
There are some connections that we have in life that involve responsibility from our side. Like, for instance, I'm talking from the perspective of a mother.
That's right.
So I can see that my child, maybe he has some effect of some maybe lack of understanding of my approach to his upbringing, let's say, from the past. And maybe now I see that there are some roots of dissatisfaction in him that create discontentment in me. Okay?
Can you keep it more simple?
Yeah,
Sounds
I'm
very-
sorry, I'm
Keep it simple. Keep it
complicating
example.
it.
He's getting
Yeah.
angry with you, basically.
Yeah,
He's
so
getting angry with you.
yeah, the idea is that maybe I'm dissatisfied and I have to look in myself for the way
So
I...
what are you dissatisfied with? Your boy, your son.
let's say that with the sadness that I see in my son.
Oh, okay,
Yeah,
so
my
your
son
son is sad.
Is very
So
sad.
you're
yeah.
distressed about
Depressed,
that.
yeah,
Yes.
he's depressed, yeah.
So what's the question?
The question is, okay, I can concentrate on my own problems, you know, and my own situation, but I cannot really refrain from dealing with his depression.
No, you don't need to refrain. That's the compassion wing. So the compassion finally is the point. That's empathy, connectedness, benefiting others. But the logic in Buddhism is you can't help anybody until you've sorted out your own mind. So if you're overwhelmed by neurotic, and let's say you are possessive and attached and freaking out, and your poor son, oh my God, you can't see him. You can't. His problem looms like a mountain for you. You're over-exaggerating it. You can't see him properly, and you have no idea to help him, how to help him. So by working on your mind, that gives you more clarity for yourself, and it enables you to see your son more clearly and know how to help him. That's the point. So you don't just sit back and don't care about your son. But the way to help, compassion is the wish to help your son. But your wisdom is the ability to know how. And that comes from you working on your own mind and listening to your own neuroses. That's the point. Are you hearing me?
Yes, I'm hearing. The thing that I would like to clarify is there is a very thin line between interference or knowing how to interfere and staying,
It's not a thin line, it's a huge line. And when you have got less attachment, less possessiveness, less fears, less anger, less jealous, it'll be crystal clear to you exactly what you should do and what you shouldn't do. Now it's a thin line because we don't know, we can't distinguish our own fears and attachment from our compassion for our boy. So we stick our nose in when it's not appropriate. And so it's not a thin line, it's a huge line. And it's based upon the skill you develop to know when to help is based upon your own wisdom. So you might know there's nothing you can do except love your boy. And the point is attachment, you see, attachment has a function of manipulating things. Attachment is a control freak. So when you've got fierce attachment, especially a mother, you want to completely make your boy happy. But that's just, it can be totally neurotic because you're not helping your boy at all. You're making because all you do is see his problem, and that looms so large for you, and you're having a panic attack. But that's mainly your attachment, so you can't help your boy at all. Whereas if you've got less attachment, more clarity, you're going to observe he is that way, it won't freak you out so much, you'll have compassion for him, and you'll have the wisdom to know what to do. And that might just be to be there and love him for who he is. You'll know what to do when you've got less attachment. Are you with me? Compassion is the point, but it's not enough. You've got to have wisdom, which is only what you get as you get less neurotic. You understand?
Yes, very much. This links to my second question, very short. So the mental understanding of what you're saying is not really putting you on the way, So
That's the first step, isn't it? Oh my
yeah,
God, darling, come on.
You can stay for an entire life in the first step of not mentally understanding.
Well, no, but that's because we're not practicing. It's like you can learn cake recipes, but forget to make the cake. You're kind of stupid. You've got to learn the recipe first, then you've got to make the cake. And that's the part here. You've got to know the theory first. At least know the theory, then you practice it. Of course you have to practice it. And often this is a difficulty. It's easy to distinguish between knowing the theory about a cake and making a cake. It's hard to distinguish between knowing it mentally and experientially. That's the part that takes time. Absolutely.
Are you going to talk about this?
I am talking about it.
Yeah.
It's your job to make it experiential, not mine. I'll give you the theories. I'm giving you the recipes, baby. You make the cake. That's not my job. Are you hearing my point? But the method is what I'm discussing, and that's where this technical meditation skill comes in, which we'll talk about later. There's no magic. There's no quick fix. There's no magic. It's hard work. Slowly. As we would say in English, practice makes perfect. As Tibetans would put it, it's a different slant. They say nothing gets more difficult with practice. So we should have confidence. So theory, and then slowly you practice it. Inexorably it will become experience. Do you understand? Time for lunch. Who has the microphone? Yep.
So it's not really a question.
Speak louder, darling.
It's not really a question, but I would love to hear your opinion or at least advice about this. So experiencing different emotions or different states of consciousness, from a chemical point of view, it's just chemicals that secrete inside our body in different amounts.
That's the physical explanation, exactly.
Yes.
That's right.
In some cultures, there are traditions or there are people that used to do old traditions or ceremonies, working with, as they call it, plant medicines in order to experience those states of consciousness.
I understand.
And
I did that very well when I was a hippie.
yeah, I believe you did. And my idea was this, that I also had some experiences in this manner, and I was, think my mind was wrapped about this thing, like Jung said it some time ago, like be very aware of unearned wisdom.
What?
So, unearned wisdom.
Oh, I see, yeah.
Because those kind of experiences can really affect your perception of this world.
Yes.
And
yes.
I would like to hear your opinion.
I will talk about it after lunch. I will do it.
Awesome.
I promise I will.
Thank you.
Lunchtime? So some of you going to eat here? Some of you going to go out? You're going to eat here? What? Who's going to stay? All of you. I'm very happy. And if you go out, that's fine too. But if you do go out, I should have let people know in advance of this, but if you do go out, I really love you to have fun, enjoy, do whatever you do, but try and take one or more of the things we've talked about and unpack and unravel it and talk about it. I know when I studied my philosophy very intensively, my philosophy teacher, my Tibetan Buddhist philosophy teacher, he'd always say 25% of what you learn comes from listening. 75% comes from what they call debate in the monasteries, as well as discussion, in other words, discussion, analysis, thinking it through, and then finally meditating on it. That's the process. So it's very powerful to do that, and I would love you if you can. Take one or more of the topics, discuss it, unpack it, and then have some questions later. So I think we'll aim for 90 minutes, but if you need more time, it'll work, okay? Are we okay, people? Is that all right? Thank you, everybody, very, very much. Please enjoy your lunch.